the skies above Earth suddenly changed. Massive ships appeared over all major cities. They moved down through the clouds and stopped, floating silently in the air. People everywhere looked up, their mouths open in shock. "What are those things?" someone shouted in Tokyo. "God help us," whispered a woman in New York, clutching her child. In Seoul, Professor Kim stood on the roof of the National Observatory. Her dark hair blew in the wind as she adjusted her instruments. The readings made no sense, the energy signatures were unlike anything in human science. "Professor, look at this," said Han, her assistant. His hands shook as he pointed to the computer screen. "The mass readings are impossible." "Not impossible," Professor Kim said quietly. "Just not human technology." She checked another screen. "These ships are using principles we haven't discovered yet." All around them, other scientists rushed about, making phone calls, taking readings. Some simply stood frozen, staring at the sky. "The military is trying to make contact," Han said, showing her a message on his phone. Professor Kim nodded. "They won't answer. They didn't come this far to talk to generals." At that moment, the air in front of them shimmered. Similar shimmers appeared in city centers worldwide, in Times Square, Trafalgar Square, the Kremlin, Tiananmen Square, everywhere. The shimmer formed into a three-dimensional image of a humanoid figure. It seemed male, had smooth, pale blue skin and eyes that were completely black. He wore elaborate robes with symbols that seemed to move and shift. When he spoke, his voice was deep and clear, coming from everywhere at once. "People of Earth. I am Emperor Du, ruler of the Galactic Imperium, master of 1,000 worlds. Your planet now stands at the edge of the great empire. You will submit to imperial rule within 30 of your days, or your world will be cleansed for more worthy inhabitants." The message repeated in every language on Earth. Then the image vanished. Panic erupted worldwide. Religious leaders called for prayer. Military forces scrambled jets, only to find they couldn't approach the alien ships. Markets crashed. People rushed to stores, buying food and supplies. At the United Nations, an emergency session began within hours. Professor Kim was flown to New York to brief the Security Council on what her instruments had discovered. "The ships are using advanced technology, but they operate on principles we can understand," she explained to the room of grim-faced leaders. "They're not magic." "Can we fight them?" asked the American representative. The Russian ambassador scoffed. "With what? Our most advanced weapons would be like throwing rocks at them." Arguments broke out across the chamber. Some nations wanted to surrender immediately. Others called for resistance at any cost. A few suggested trying to negotiate better terms. "We cannot bow to these invaders," shouted one representative. "Would you rather see humanity extinct?" countered another. While the diplomats argued, Professor Kim slipped away to a quiet room with her data. Han joined her, bringing coffee. "They're not paying attention to what matters," Professor Kim said, frustrated. "Look at this." She pointed to patterns in the alien transmission. Han leaned closer. "What am I seeing? This signal has embedded information. Much more than just the Emperor's message." She typed rapidly, isolating sections of the data. "There's something strange here, a pattern that doesn't fit with the rest of the transmission." Han watched as she worked, pulling apart layers of the alien signal. "Maybe it's just their communication protocol?" Professor Kim shook her head. "No, it's almost like a flaw." She highlighted a repeating section. "This shouldn't be here if their technology is as advanced as it seems. It's inefficient." As night fell over New York, Professor Kim stayed hunched over her computer while debates raged in the main chamber. Military leaders from around the world joined virtually, proposing plans that everyone knew would fail against such advanced technology. In her quiet corner, Professor Kim's eyes widened as she made a discovery. "Han, look at this. The signal has a weakness, a fundamental one." Han studied the screen. "What does it mean?" Professor Kim looked up, a small smile forming on her tired face. It means they're not as invincible as they want us to believe. And that could be the key to everything. She saved her findings to a secure drive. This discovery might give humanity its only chance. 3 days after the alien ships arrived, General Park called a secret meeting in an underground facility near Mount Hala. Scientists, military experts, and intelligence officers from around the world gathered in a large room filled with screens and computers. General Park stood at the front, his gray uniform neat and his face serious. He was known for being calm even in the worst situations. That calm was needed now more than ever. "The President has asked me to lead our response team," he said. "We have 27 days before the Emperor's deadline. We must find a way to protect Earth." He looked at Professor Kim, who sat with dark circles under her eyes. She had barely slept since her discovery. "Professor Kim has found something important in the alien signals. That's why she's here. But first, let's understand what we're facing." Intelligence analyst Lee stood up. He was younger than most people in the room, but his work on the alien transmissions had impressed everyone. He clicked a button, and images appeared on the main screen. "We've been collecting and translating their communications," Lee said. "The Imperium is huge, over 1,000 planets. They've been expanding for at least 10,000 years. He showed maps of the galaxy with the Imperium's territory marked in red. It covered nearly a quarter of the Milky Way. Their pattern is always the same. They arrive, demand surrender, and give a deadline. Most civilizations give up without a fight. What happens to those who resist? Someone asked. Lee's face darkened. From what we can tell, those planets are destroyed. The aliens call it cleansing. The room was silent. But here's the interesting part, Lee continued. They almost never have to use force. The fear is enough. Most worlds surrender right away. Professor Kim stood up next. She connected her computer to the main screen. Their technology is very advanced, but it's not perfect, she said. Their communication system uses quantum principles, but there's an unusual pattern in their transmissions. She showed the strange data she had found. It's like they're using an old system that no one ever updated because it works well enough. This suggests something important about their civilization. General Park nodded. They don't innovate because they don't need to. No one challenges them. Exactly, Professor Kim said. And that might be their weakness. Just then, the door opened. A group of 5 people walked in, looking tired and dirty. Their leader was Captain Kong, a Special Forces officer known for impossible missions. You're early, General Park said, surprised. Captain Kong smiled slightly. We had good luck. Everyone in the room stared. These were the members of Operation Shadow, a dangerous mission to get information from the aliens. No one expected them to return so soon or at all. We found a small scout ship separated from the main fleet, Captain Kong explained. We managed to get aboard while they were running tests on Earth's atmosphere. He placed a small device on the table. It glowed with a soft blue light. This is their data storage. We copied as much as we could before leaving. Scientists rushed to connect the alien device to their computers. Soon, information began to fill the screens, strange symbols, diagrams, and images of worlds across the galaxy. It will take time to translate everything, Lee said, already working on the data. But some things are clear already. He showed an image of alien soldiers training. They moved with perfect precision, but something seemed odd about them. They're following exact patterns, Professor Kim noticed. No variation or creativity. Captain Kong nodded. That's what we saw on their ship too. Everything was orderly, but rigid. When something unexpected happened, like us coming aboard, they were slow to react. He pulled up more images from his mission. Their technology is powerful, but their thinking is old. They haven't faced a real challenge in thousands of years. They've grown complacent, General Park realized. Yes, Captain Kong agreed. And we found something else. He showed images of other alien species living under Imperial rule. Many of their subject worlds aren't happy. They obey out of fear, not loyalty. Professor Kim studied the data carefully. This confirms my theory about their communication systems. They stopped innovating because they didn't need to. She looked at General Park with new hope in her eyes. They expect us to surrender or die. But humans are different. We've always survived by adapting and finding new solutions. General Park looked around the room at the determined faces. Then that's exactly what we'll do. We have 27 days to find a way to surprise the Imperium. For the first time since the alien ships appeared, a feeling of possibility filled the room. Earth might have a chance after all. For 2 weeks, Professor Kim barely left her laboratory. She worked day and night, surrounded by equations and circuit designs. Sleep came only when she collapsed at her desk. Food was whatever Han brought her. The world outside continued to panic as the deadline grew closer. General Park visited on the 15th day. "Time is running out," he said, looking at the mess of components spread across the lab tables. "The Security Council needs answers." Professor Kim looked up from her work, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "I've found it," she said simply. She led General Park to a whiteboard covered in complex equations. "The aliens use quantum communication, but they've been using the same system for thousands of years. They missed something important." She pointed to a particular equation. "Every quantum system has hidden patterns. They only use the main channel. But there are always side channels, what we call quantum noise. They ignore it because they think it's useless." "And it's not?" General Park asked. "No. We can use these side channels to create something like a backdoor into their systems." She showed him a small device she had built. It was about the size of a coin, metallic with tiny lights embedded in its surface. This device can tap into their quantum network and send signals they won't detect. But that's not all. She smiled slightly. When activated together, these devices can actually manipulate their network. General Park picked up the tiny device. "And what exactly will that do?" "It will break their control over their ships. Not permanently, but long enough to show them we're not helpless." Within days, factories around the world were secretly manufacturing thousands of these devices. Scientists in every country verified Professor Kim's work. It wasn't just possible, it was brilliant. But there was one problem: the devices needed to be placed on the Imperial ships, especially the main command ship where Emperor Du resided. Captain Kong volunteered immediately. "My team can do it," he said during the planning meeting. "We've been inside their ships before." "It's too dangerous," General Park argued. "Their security will be higher now." "We don't have a choice," Captain Kong replied. "And we have an advantage they don't expect. They think we're going to surrender." 5 days before the deadline, Captain Kang's team launched their mission. Using stealth technology developed from studying the alien data, they approached the command ship in small, undetectable crafts. "Remember," Captain Kong told his team as they prepared to board, "place the devices near their communication nodes. Professor Kim has marked the locations on your maps." The mission was nearly discovered twice. An alien guard walked past just as one team member was placing a device. Another time, an automated security system almost detected them. But after 6 tense hours, all the devices were planted. "Mission complete," Captain Kong reported after his team returned safely. "Now we wait." On the final day, Emperor Du's hologram appeared again over every major city. His black eyes seemed to stare into the soul of every human watching. "Your time has ended," he announced. "Surrender your world to the Imperium. Your leaders will now acknowledge my authority." According to the plan, the leaders of Earth were supposed to gather in New York to formally submit to Imperial rule. Instead, something unexpected happened. On every screen worldwide, leaders from different nations appeared together. They spoke in one voice, a message that had been secretly agreed upon. "Humanity stands free." From his monitoring station, General Park gave the signal. Professor Kim pressed a button on her control panel. Across Earth's orbit, the tiny devices activated simultaneously. They connected to each other, forming a quantum network that interfaced with the Imperial systems. On the alien ships, lights flickered. Systems went offline and then came back differently. The massive vessels that had hovered menacingly for a month suddenly moved out of formation, forming a circle above Earth. Inside the Imperial command ship, Emperor Du stared in disbelief as his control screens changed before his eyes. "What is happening?" he demanded. His chief technician looked terrified. "The humans, they've somehow accessed our quantum network. They're controlling our positioning systems." The Emperor watched helplessly as his mighty fleet moved according to human commands. On Earth, Professor Kim's fingers flew across her control panel, executing the program she had designed. The Imperial ships formed a pattern in Earth's orbit, not random, but a clear message visible from the planet's surface. They arranged themselves into a symbol that every alien civilization would recognize, the Imperial crest, but broken in half. "Impossible," Emperor Du whispered. "This technology should be beyond them." Professor Kim allowed herself a small smile as she watched her monitors. "The quantum side channel works exactly as I calculated," she told General Park. "They never saw it coming because they never looked for it." General Park nodded, impressed. "And now?" "Now," she said, "they have to talk to us as equals. Because we've just proven we understand something about their technology that they themselves missed." Across Earth, people looked up at the night sky and saw the Imperial ships forming the broken symbol. A cheer rose up from every city and village. For the first time since the aliens arrived, humanity felt hope. Emperor Du paced in his command chamber aboard the Imperial flagship. The walls glowed with shifting colors that usually reflected his calm mood. Now they pulsed angry red. His advisors stood in a half-circle, none daring to speak first. "How is this possible?" Emperor Du finally demanded, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. "These humans are primitive. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours." Science Minister Choi stepped forward, bowing low. His hands trembled slightly as he activated a holographic display. "Great Emperor, we have analyzed what happened," he said carefully. "The humans somehow accessed our quantum communication network through channels we overlooked." "Overlooked?" The Emperor's voice was dangerously quiet. "Our systems are perfect. They have served the Imperium for millennia." Science Minister Choi swallowed hard. "That may be the problem, Your Majesty. Our systems haven't changed in thousands of years. The humans discovered something new about quantum principles, something we never investigated because our existing systems worked well enough." The military commander, General Yu, stepped forward. "It doesn't matter. We should cleanse this planet immediately. Their defiance cannot stand." "And then what?" asked Science Minister Choi, surprising everyone with his boldness. "If they discovered this weakness in our systems, what else might they know? What might they have already shared with other worlds?" The Emperor stared out the viewport at Earth, so small and blue below. For 10,000 years, the Imperium had expanded without serious challenge. Planets surrendered or were destroyed. It was simple. But now, their approach is different, admitted Science Minister Choi. They found solutions we never considered. This species thinks in unusual ways. In the war room, General Yu prepared the fleet for bombardment. Thousands of weapons powered up, targeting Earth's major cities. All awaited the Emperor's command. "We should strike now," General Yu insisted through the communication link. "Show other worlds what happens to those who defy us." But Emperor Du hesitated. Something about this situation felt different. In all his long life, no species had ever surprised him like this. Meanwhile, across the 1,000 worlds of the Imperium, news spread rapidly. Despite efforts to control information, reports of Earth's defiance reached even the most distant planets. Species that had lived under Imperial rule for generations watched and wondered. On Proxima Centauri 3, the native six-limbed Centaurians gathered around communication terminals. The humans refused to surrender, one elder said in disbelief. "And they still live," another added. Perhaps the Imperium is not as all-powerful as we believed, whispered a third. Similar conversations happened on hundreds of worlds. Species that had accepted their fate as Imperial subjects for millennia began to question. Back on the flagship, Emperor Du called for an emergency council. Representatives from the oldest Imperial families joined virtually. This situation is unprecedented, said Councillor Min, whose family had served the throne for 40 generations. No world has ever successfully defied an Imperial ultimatum. We must destroy them immediately, insisted another councillor. Before this rebellion spreads. Science Minister Choi spoke up. There is another option, Your Majesty. We could talk to them. The council chamber erupted in shocked protests. Silence, commanded Emperor Du. All voices immediately stopped. The Emperor closed his eyes, thinking. When he opened them, his decision was made. Prepare a communication to Earth. I will meet with their representatives. General Yu gasped. Your Majesty, this has never been done. Meeting with unsubmitted beings as equals. Not as equals, Emperor Du corrected. But I will hear what they have to say before deciding their fate. On Earth, the message arrived during a tense meeting of world leaders. The holographic communication appeared in the center of the room, causing everyone to fall silent. Your planet has shown unexpected qualities, Emperor Du's image stated. I will grant an audience to your representatives. 2 may come aboard my vessel under protection of Imperial safe passage. When the message ended, all eyes turned to Professor Kim. You understand their technology better than anyone, General Park said. You should go. Professor Kim nodded slowly. I'll need Captain Kong with me. His experience on their ships will be valuable. This is extremely dangerous, warned General Park. The Emperor might be planning to capture you, to learn how we access their systems. We don't have much choice, Captain Kong said. This might be our only chance to avoid war. The next day, a small Imperial shuttle descended to Earth. Professor Kim and Captain Kong stood ready, dressed in formal clothes that represented Earth rather than any single nation. Both wore hidden devices that continued Professor Kim's work on quantum communication. As they boarded the alien shuttle, Captain Kong whispered, Are you afraid? Professor Kim watched Earth grow smaller below them as they ascended toward the massive Imperial flagship. Yes, she admitted. But also curious. No human has ever had this opportunity before. The shuttle docked with the flagship. The door slid open to reveal Imperial guards in ceremonial armor. Follow, one commanded in heavily accented English. Professor Kim and Captain Kong exchanged a glance, then stepped forward into history. For the first time, humans would meet the Emperor of 1,000 worlds not as conquered subjects, but as representatives of a world that had done the impossible, defied the Imperium and survived. Professor Kim and Captain Kong followed their Imperial guards through hallways that seemed to be made of living crystal. The walls shimmered with colors that shifted as they passed. Both humans tried to appear calm, though their hearts raced with a mixture of fear and wonder. No unsubmitted beings have ever walked these halls, whispered one Imperial official to another, not realizing the humans could hear. The throne room was vast, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Emperor Du sat on a floating platform rather than a traditional throne. His black eyes studied the humans carefully as they approached. Unlike the transmission holograms, in person the Emperor appeared older, with lines etched into his blue skin. He wore simple robes rather than the elaborate ceremonial garments they had seen before. You may approach, he said, his voice surprisingly soft. Professor Kim and Captain Kong walked forward and stopped at the distance their protocol briefing had suggested, not too close, not too far. Your species puzzles me, Emperor Du said after a long silence. You know you cannot win a war against us. You could have submitted and preserved yourselves, as thousands of worlds before you have done. Captain Kong stood straight, meeting the Emperor's gaze directly. Humanity doesn't accept chains. We find another way. A murmur ran through the Imperial advisors at this boldness. One started to speak angrily, but the Emperor raised his hand for silence. Explain this other way, he commanded. Professor Kim stepped forward. May I demonstrate? After the Emperor nodded, she removed a small device from her pocket. Imperial guards tensed, but she slowly placed it on the floor. It projected a hologram showing Earth's solar system. We discovered principles of quantum communication that your empire overlooked, she explained. Not because we're smarter, but because we're different. Humans question everything, even when systems work. We never stop looking for new possibilities. She activated another function of the device. The hologram changed to show a new propulsion system, unlike anything the Imperium used. This is our prototype for faster-than-light travel, she continued. It works on principles your scientists dismissed centuries ago. Science Minister Choi moved closer, his eyes wide. Impossible, he whispered. The calculations would never. They do work, Professor Kim said, if you approach the problem differently. She showed more innovations: energy systems, materials, communication methods. Each one made the Imperial scientists more astonished. These weren't just small improvements but fundamentally new approaches. You developed all this in just 1 month? Emperor Du asked. No, Captain Kong answered. We've been developing these for years. But your arrival gave us purpose and focus. The Emperor was silent for a long time. Finally, he descended from his floating throne and walked directly up to the humans, something that made his advisors gasp. In 10,000 years, he said quietly, no species has ever surprised me like yours. For 3 days, negotiations continued. The humans presented terms for peace, not as begging subjects but as potential allies. They offered to share some innovations in exchange for independence and protection. News of these unprecedented negotiations spread across the Imperium. On the planet Rigel 7, the native population staged their first protest in 500 years. On Betelgeuse 3, scholars openly discussed human ideas about freedom. The Imperial Council was divided. Many wanted to destroy Earth despite the consequences. Others saw opportunity in alliance rather than conquest. If we accept their terms, argued one counselor, other worlds will demand the same status. And if we destroy them, countered Science Minister Choi, we lose access to their innovations. The humans think differently. They could help solve problems our civilization has struggled with for millennia. On the final day, Emperor Du made his decision. The treaty that emerged shocked the galaxy. Earth would remain independent, not a vassal world, but an ally of the Imperium. Some human innovations would be shared, others kept secret. Earth would have protection from other potential threats in the galaxy. Most importantly, humans would be allowed to travel the stars freely, something no newly discovered species had ever been granted immediately. As Professor Kim and Captain Kong prepared to return to Earth with the signed treaty, Emperor Du spoke to them privately. Your world has changed the Imperium forever, he told them. Not through force, but through something more powerful, a different way of thinking. 6 months later, the first official human starship launched from Earth. Named Discovery, it carried scientists, explorers, and diplomats to visit other worlds of the Imperium. Wherever they went, they found eager audiences. Species that had been conquered for thousands of years were fascinated by humans and their ideas. Though some Imperial officials tried to limit contact, humans found ways to share their most important message: chains are never necessary. On distant worlds, long dormant hopes began to stir. Change spread through the galaxy, not through war but through ideas. 1,000 years later, historians would mark that first contact with Earth as the beginning of the Imperium's transformation. What had been a stagnant empire of fearful subjects became a thriving alliance of diverse civilizations. And it all began because, when faced with overwhelming power, humanity refused to submit and instead found another way. The end.